Okay, it's July 16th, 2024, and I'm with Mr. John J. Jeckovich, and we're reading his book, Their Mother's Sons, and we're on chapter 10. After all these months and months of basic training, he finally made it into the combat area, and we're on page 253 of his approximately 900-page book, which basically talks about the time he's kindergarten to retirement. And this chapter 10 is getting close to combat. It's called Church Service and the Bulge. Would you like to read this, Mr. Jeckovich, or would you like I?
No, go ahead with it, Dave.
All right, what about your dog tag number? Your dog tag number?
Huh? 42965.
Okay, I'll start reading. This is about entering the Battle of the Bulge. And the Battle of the Bulge was a horrible and vicious place to be. The Battle of Bulge cost the Reich over 100,000 casualties and tremendous losses in military equipment. The Battle of Bulge was the last major military offensive in Western Europe. So Hitler at this time, he said this is going to be his last shot to win this war, and he basically said, if I can't win it, I'm going to take out lots of Americans with me, and he did. The German offensive in the Ardennes region of Belgium was only temporarily successful in halting the Allied troops. One thing that was extremely bad for the American soldiers and probably also the German soldiers, this was the coldest winter in this area in 30 years. The temperatures were as low as 20 below. It was hard on both the German and American troops, and it was also hell on the tanks. The tanks just couldn't make it. Then stories spread of the massacre of soldiers and civilians in Malmedy and Stavelot, of paratroopers dropping behind lines and English-speaking Germans disguised as Americans. Do you remember your warning about the English-speaking Germans?
Who?
Do you remember when you were at the Battle of the Bulge, they warned you about English-speaking Germans?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big problem, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, but they still have access.
Yeah, disguised as Americans, capturing critical bridges, cutting communication lines,
Yeah.
and spreading a lot of rumors. Lasting 6 brutal weeks, from December 16th of 1944, John Jeckovich, it started actually December 16th, 1944, and went to January 25th, 1945, and John Jeckovich was on the front lines in the Battle of Bulge with heavy artillery, which is a high-powered machine gun. It took 3 people to operate it. One would carry the tripod, 150 pounds. Another was ammo barrels, and sometimes there was 2 ammo barrels. And Mr. Jeckovich was operating the heavy machine gun. Interesting note, even though some of the temperatures were below 20 degrees, that machine gun got to such hot temperatures by firing rapidly that it had to be water cooled. Now the water was instantly freezing, so they found some type of antifreeze to put in the water so it didn't freeze to cool the barrel. And if someone would touch that barrel, it would burn their hands severely. And it ended on January 25th, 1945, and the assault called the Battle of Bulge took place during frigid weather conditions, with some 30 German divisions attacking battle-fatigued American troops across some 85 miles of densely wooded forest. And towards the end of the Battle of the Bulge, most of the Germans abandoned their useless vehicles. They ran out of fuel. The Germans ran out of fuel. So the Germans began a long and hopeless trudge home through the snow. Nazi Germany had run out of gas. Americans had fuel, Germans were out. The Nazi Germany had just simply run out of gas. It would be false to argue that the Bulge or World War II was more broadly won by its allies because of our oil superiority. And that was the biggest thing, was fuel, the almighty fuel.
Yeah, well, the RAF, the American Air Force, were bombing the hell out of their supplies. That's why they couldn't do nothing.
Yeah, and this went on 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
7 days a week. The American Air Force would bomb during the day, and the RAF with the Spitfires would bomb at night. It was continuous.
Yeah.
Germany and this area was just down to rubble. And if they found any bridges, and if they found any oil depots, they're all blown up.
Yeah.
The Germans have ran out of steam. I was awakened with the bright sunlight shining directly on my face. Leip was asleep, but was not snoring at this time. The sea had calmed down considerably along with the wind, and I was thankful for that. I got up and placed my half of the shelter over Leip and reached for my light pack, which would be used as a pillow. All I wanted to do at this time was to brush my teeth. The only problem with that, I did not have any water to rinse my mouth out after brushing. Still on the troop ship going over. I found my toothbrush and toothpaste and located a remote spot behind a bulkhead to brush my teeth. For some strange reason, it did not feel right to stand among ship and be seen brushing one's teeth. I swished most of the toothpaste out of my mouth, but I could still taste the peppermint flavor, which did not do much for my sensitive stomach. Returning, I found Leip still sleeping. I gave him several tugs on the shelter and called him to get up, at the same time stowing my toilet articles. I gently nudged him and again started to stir and blink his eyes in the bright sunlight. Anything I could not tolerate was seeing someone who I did not especially care for when he first awoke. It was just annoyed me greatly. To distract myself from watching Leip, I started to fold the shelter halves and tidy up our sleeping area. I guess he didn't like to see him waking up. In all likelihood, we would not be here tonight, and in all probability, we'd be on dry land again. I told Leip to straighten up a bit, and then we could try our luck at the galley once again for some chow. I was not looking forward to a second visit to the ship's galley after the unsavory experience the night before. In all likelihood, we would not be here tonight. As we approached the galley, there was once again the unpleasant, noxious odor from within its confines. I was starting to get sick all over again, and Leip had come to the same conclusion. We asked one of the messmen what was for breakfast, and he quickly replied, "Bangers and smashers."
What are bangers?
What are bangers and smashers, Mr. Jeckovich?
Huh?
What are bangers and smashers?
Dangerous what?
You asked the cook, you're having breakfast on the ship, and he said there's bangers and smashers for breakfast. What is it?
Smackers is bacon and eggs.
And how about a banger? Banger and smasher.
Banger is the toast.
Okay. So you had bangers and smashers. Well, bangers was a large, greasy pork sausage, and smashers were boiled or fried potatoes. I did not relish either. Leip was not too enthusiastic about the breakfast. So those limeys really make food really greasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I settled for hot coffee, which was terrible, and a few biscuits. Lape tried the bangers and smashers, but after a mouthful, settled also for coffee and biscuits. Thank goodness this would be our last visit to the galley, for the scuttlebutt was that we'd been landing on the coast of France sometime before dark. We walked back to our area and stowed our shelter halves into the packs and policed the area. Since we would not be back, Lapp sat on the deck Lape sat on the deck contemplating some far-out thing, and I decided to walk about the ship and see if I could find out any news. I talked to some of the men from the 2nd platoon, but they did not know anything new. I finally wound up at a fantail and arrived where just Fink was coming from breakfast. I asked him how he liked breakfast. He smiled and asked, "What breakfast?" Fink did not know any more than the rest of us. How could he? There were no officers or even first sergeants or platoon sergeants on board. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. The Army was always spouting off about team integrity and leadership, but there was no team integrity shown here, and certainly there was no leadership displayed here. Fink and a few other squad leaders, most whom we have not even in the grade of all the leadership we had seen since leaving Jeckovich. Fink was busy getting his gear together, so I made the excuse I had to go to the head and began walking to the front of the ship. I still did not see any signs of land in the direction. It was clear out, and even though it was cold and raw, the sun was out, and if I stood or sat in the warmth and glow, I would start feeling warm once again. I found a warm spot in the sunlight, pulled out a paperback from my pack, and resumed reading where I left off several days ago. It was the Brothers Karamazov, and I enjoyed reading it once again. It would help release some of the tension, form a bit of escape from the situation it was confronted with. Sort of like dreaming you were somewhere else besides where you presently were. I must have been reading for over an hour, and I started to become cold once again when the sun moved away from where I was sitting. I got up and pulled the wool knit cap down further on my ears and started to walk briskly on the deck to get the blood circulating more rapidly. It was about 1400 hours. I felt a bit hungry and opened one of the dinners of K-rations. As I ate its contents of cheese and cracker, franks and beans, and for dessert a chocolate bar, I thought of the time Jean had made me a few Sundays ago. It seems like years ago, and I found it difficult to relate it with where I was now. I reached the spot where Lape and I bunked down last night, but Lake was nowhere about. His pack was gone. I suspect he was roaming about the ship, looking for me or scrounging up something to eat. Minutes?
60.
Yeah.
I sat there a while, and since the sun was casting in a warm glow over the immediate area, and began reading once again. I must have been reading for a short while, then suddenly there was a shouting and moving about. I could see land at a distance. This land was the coast of France. In a few hours, we would be off the ship and on land once again. My spirits were revived at the thought of once again eating army food and having a warm place to sleep at night. I put the paper book back into my pack and I joined the crowd at railing and watching the approaching landfall. An hour later, the ship's public address system announced that all Army personnel would prepare to disembark within the next few hours. There would be trucks waiting in transport to our designated area. The finished and the formal announcements with a good luck and good hunting we all thought was rather prophetic and took it as a good omen or a cautionary advisory. We landed at the Port Le Havre and immediately boarded our huge tractor-trailer trucks. These trucks of the Red Ball Express of the Quartermaster Corps were semi-trailers literally cut in half with the top covered with tarps. Only the trailer we rode in, or I should say stood up in, had no canvas tops, but was open to the elements and a bitter cold wind. We were herded into them so much like cattle.
What?
We were herded into these big Red Ball Express trucks with no top on them. They cut the tops off of them. The Red Ball Express trucks when you landed in France.
The Red Ball trucks?
Yeah, you landed in France. You said
Oh, the back were all canvas covered.
Yeah, you said you're...
Well, I'm not going to read this.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead. Take your time.
Well, no, I can't hear you and read the book.
The trucks of the Red Ball Express, or Quartermaster...
All covered by color people, yeah.
Yeah. Or I should say stood up, as he opened to the elements in the bitter cold wind. We were herded in much like cattle. With our duffel bags, each trailer would take roughly to 40 to 50 soldiers. Standing up with equipment, we would hang on to curved metal canvas supports that straddled each side of the trailer. Since there were no canvas, it was a bitter cold ride with no way to shelter yourself from the cold and wind created by the rapid movement of the tractor. The drivers had no concern about their human cargo, nor did they care at all about our safety. They whisked down the narrow streets of the small farm towns at breakneck speed, escorted by several MPs on motorcycles, their sirens wailing and red lights blinking. After an hour or so near freezing conditions, holding on to the uprights overhead while the driver maneuvered the curves and winding roads at great speed, we finally reached our destination. There was nothing there but a large expanse of an open field. The question on everyone's mind as we stood on the road, where do we bunk down tonight? We expected a warm place, sheltered from the cold wind. Instead, we're dropped off in an open field with nothing in sight for miles. Suddenly a familiar voice rang out. H Company over here. It was Sergeant Rupert. The first I'd seen him since Haverford West. First squad over here, he yelled, on some southern twang. You better hurry before it starts to rain, or you'll be sleeping wet tonight. He drawled with his usual twinkle in his eye, as if he was enjoying every minute of watching us squirm and fidget, trying to adjust to our new way of life. Leip and I formed our tent with two shelter halves and started to stretch out the stakes when it started to rain. We managed to get it set up before the deluge came down. We sat inside on the ground looking at the rain coming down, dejected and hopelessly bewildered, a little frightened. I took out my poncho from my duffel bag and put on my helmet liner. I told Leip I would go outside and reset the stakes before the tent came down on us from the rain pounding on it. It was coming down quite hard, and there were puddles forming around the perimeter of the tent. Water would be inside shortly if I did not get busy to dig a trench for the water to drain away from the tent. I asked Leip to to pass out on an entrenching tool to trench around the tape. Others had the same idea. As I looked up, and once only an empty meadow with nothing but trees and scrub brush, there are now several hundred pump tents set up neatly rowed. Somehow seeing all those tents made me proud and confident that, despite everything, we would do all right over here. Sergeant Rupert came by in his poncho and helmet liner and informed me that there was straw available at the nearby farmhouse.
What?
Straw available at the nearby farmhouse. I relayed the message to Leif. But he only said that he did not want to get wet and for some itchy straw. After completing the trench, I walked to the farmhouse, picked up 2 bales of straw and carried them back to the tent. After cutting the baling wire with my trench knife, I began to spread the straw around the floor of the tent. I told Leif that we needed 2 more bales, but he insisted I go since I was out in the rain and wet already. I returned with the bales of straw and Leif helped spread them about, which gave us about a foot of soft straw to put our sleeping bags on. Post had not arrived with the Jeep trailer yet. Therefore, we had no sleeping bags for tonight, and Leif was lying on the straw and politely instructed me not to get it wet. As I was drenched, I ignored the remark and stood outside as the rain had stopped. I noticed a field kitchen being set up, which made it only a bright spot in an already dismal picture. Finn came by and said there'd be hot coffee and sandwiches in about 20 minutes. GI coffee, he emphasized with a smile. Leif heard the news, and I could hear him searching for his canteen cup. I told him to fetch mine also, and shortly thereafter he appeared at the entrance of the tent with the cups. We walked toward the field kitchen. We walked towards the field kitchen and got our first whiff of the freshly made coffee. It smelled great, and I put a whole new perspective on our situation. As we stood around drinking the hot GI coffee and eating bologna sandwiches, we found out that we're outside of a town called WWII Vet, 40-50 miles southeast of Le Havre. We would be here for several days or until our equipment arrived, and then we would be assigned to various locations. We were also informed of reports of German paratroopers in GI uniforms in the area, and to be alert. We would be issued live ammunition for our individual weapons, which we carried all times from now on. There would be a large contingent on guard duty tonight, and we would get our assignments later in the day. Mail call. Any mail for Mr. Jeckovich?
Right here.
There you go, Mr. Jeckovich, your current mail. I'll take a break while you read it. Now, Mr. Jeckovich is sleeping in a field, and they're waiting for, keep reading it, and they're looking for other instructions where to go. And in some parts of where they're located, it was not only 20 below, but it also got to be 40 below Fahrenheit.
Tonight?
No, Fahrenheit. Freezing the Germans' tanks and equipment, shutting down diesel engines, and freezing German soldiers. So those damn diesel engines could not do well in that cold weather.
What's that?
German diesel tanks could not do well in that very...
Yeah, keep it running.
Yeah. I'm going to take a break reading. I'm just going to watch you read, and if you see anything interesting in that
What,
map...
you gonna watch the news?
No, I'm going to take a break right now. I'm just going to watch you get your mail. If you see anything interesting, say it.
St. Augustine. Shit, St. Augustine. Did you find anything interesting in that magazine? This one?
Yeah, did you find anything interesting?
Yeah, a lot of advertising.
Mostly advertisements, huh?
Leak fillers, garage door problems, slippery sidewalks.
Okay. Okay.
What are you doing, Dave?
I'm just waiting for you to finish looking at your magazine.